Hey there, and thanks for tuning in to Squash Radio. My name is Connor O'Malley, and I'm your host. Before we get into today's show, I wanted to share a little bit about me and why Squash Radio exists. So I've been a passionate squash player for almost 20 years, but what makes my path slightly different from your average squash player is I've also made squash my career. I've worn almost every hat and worked in almost every role in the industry. Some quick examples are I've gone from being a volunteer at a professional event to then becoming the CEO of the US Open. I've gone from trying to make Team USA to then becoming the director of all national teams while working at US Squash. And I've certainly gone from just playing on squash courts to focusing on how the sport can grow in the United States. What has been a big part of fueling my passion all these years are the fascinating, passionate, and dedicated people involved in our sport. So Squash Radio, well, that's just a way to try and help share those stories. We hope you like it, and if you're interested in growing the sport, get in touch. Or can you help share these stories? Comments are welcome on any social media, or email us at squashradio@gmail.com. That's squashradio@gmail.com. Our biggest challenge is always trying to get the word out, so any help is so much appreciated. Without further ado, please enjoy the show. Squash Radio listeners, we've got some big news to share. We are thrilled to announce that Squash Radio has its first ever sponsor. Squash Radio has been a way to engage the squash community by sharing some great stories of the people involved in the sport. So to have a sponsor partner come in and support this initiative, and who is just excited to bring these stories to you all, is truly an honor. We will be sharing more about their journey, and you might just see their products at a squash court near you. More to come. What about this?
This call is being recorded.
For some quick background on our guests in this episode, here's a quick overview. Hope Prockop is one of the most remarkable women involved in the sport of squash in the United States. At her core, Hope is the ultimate competitor and uses that drive to propel her through all avenues of the sport. Now, what makes Hope so remarkable? Hope has been involved in the sport in so many wide-ranging ways. You'll learn through our conversation, Hope was a top junior squash player who went on to be a top-ranked college player, both in the team and individual rankings, while attending Harvard University. After college, she continued to work on her game and became part of Team USA, representing the red, white, and blue at the World Team Championships and the Pan Am Fed Cups. Her focus and drive extended into Masters level squash, winning 4 British Masters Open and placing top 3 at the World Masters Championship. While coaching for a while, Hope decided to explore another avenue for the sport, which is so crucial and often neglected. This is becoming an official or referee. Just like in other sports, there are different levels, but in quick order, Hope has risen to the highest level, sitting in the hot seat for the World Team Championships, the US Open, and College National Championships. Hope is the ultimate blend of being a cheerleader, superfan, and competitor. When she's not found by the squash courts, Hope takes to the ice or field to serenade stadiums with the national anthem, like she did at Fenway Park for the Red Sox. Hope is a dynamic person who throws her energy into every situation, be it a one-on-one conversation, coaching, playing, or helping others to do the same. Please enjoy our conversation. Hey there, squash fans. I'm your host, Connor O'Malley, and this morning I'd like to give a big Squash Radio welcome to our guest, and that is Hope Prockop. Welcome to the show, Hope.
Thanks, Connor. It's great to be here.
I know during these times, it's always interesting to hear where people are shacking up or holding down the fort, and tell us, where is the Prockop family these days?
So at the moment, and for the remainder of this academic year, we're living in Providence. My husband has a sabbatical, a well-timed sabbatical from his teaching job at Groton School, where we've been for 21 years. And we chose to come down to Providence, to come down to Rhode Island, where there's some great squash, there's some great boating, ocean access, and we wanted to live a little soft city living, and it's going really well. It's good to be here.
And you guys have been really trying to make the best use of this time. And what's been the favorite activity that you guys have been doing as a family?
Well, since March, when things shut down, we were still in Groton and we had our kids with us for the first couple months. And we were looking forward to making this move in June. So there was a fair bit of getting organized, and we did some nice dinners and outdoor outings, and it felt good and fun. The kids were with us for the first sort of 2 months of our time in Rhode Island. And that was also fun because that's making a new home and exploring some things, all with the restrictions of COVID. But we spent some time on the water with our kids, and that's been really fun. We love fishing. We like being out on the water, a little water skiing and sunsets and enjoying that. And then one of our children moved to New York for a job. So we have the other child home, and we love having her home. And it's just a little different when the nest was empty for a while and then is filled again. And we're delighted to have her home and be a part of us. And I expect that at some point she will leave, but it's great having her around for now. It's really been fun to explore Providence and the great outdoors. We are really drawn to the ocean and the beaches, and that's going to change when the weather gets cold, I'm sure, but it's hard to know what's going to happen in a couple of months. In any case, we're very lucky that the Nickel Squash Club is open for business with masks, but they are open and accessible. And that has been an amazing resource for us. So little squash, walking the dog, getting out on the boat, just enjoying life a little more slowly. I think as the weather gets cooler, one of Dave's passions is woodworking, and he's got a shop set up in our basement. So he'll get committed to making some projects, doing some projects, and finishing some things that has been on his to-do list. That's part of his sabbatical this year, is just to be able to recharge and not think about his teaching, but he's always thinking about his teaching, but not have to produce anything. So a lot of exercise, a lot of sleep, a lot of reading for him. And that's really great. It's really great for our family.
That's awesome. There's so much we can talk about today, and especially with your career and your involvement in squash and the amount of different, you certainly have worn many hats over the past couple of years, and we're going to dive into that. But I thought would be an interesting orientation point for our listeners is talking about your role as an official within the sport, or a referee. And you are distinguished as the highest ranking women referee or official in the United States. But where does that put you on the global scale?
You're nice to say those nice things. And what I would say is I feel unbelievably lucky to be included in the small but growing referee community. I would say, and you will hear more about this over the course of this chat, but for me, squash is a buffet. There's lots of different things that you can choose from. You can play, you can coach, you can referee, you can support. There's so many different ways you can be involved in this buffet. And I am definitely a baby in the referee community. It's an hors d'oeuvre, if you will, but I'm really looking forward to getting deeper into it because it's an amazing way to support the game, learn about the game, and be around people. Some of the folks that are much higher up the food chain have so many interesting things to say and to think about the game. It's a game we love for the people, the experiences, the many aspects of it. But refereeing is not going away. And it was actually probably 5 or 6 years ago when I was looking to really be more involved with squash. Maybe that would have felt hard to imagine 5 years ago because I was still pretty in it pretty thickly. But I wanted to do some coaching at a higher level, and there didn't appear to be as many vacancies, but I basically just checked every box on the volunteer position of the US Squash page and found myself getting an answer from Rich Wade, who welcomed me into the refereeing pool and then began to help me and mentor me and guide me through the process coming up through the US Squash refereeing certification program. And there were some amazing matches that I had the privilege of being a part of. And then there were opportunities to do some travel and listen in on and be a part of some of the highest referees. Last year, it was an incredible experience to be down in Lima, Peru, refereeing at the Pan American Games And then a couple months later, I was on the US Open referee team. Mind you, I was the lowest on that food chain, but what an incredible privilege to be behind the scenes of the operation that they all put together. It is just incredibly impressive. And then a couple months after that, I was on the team at the men's world teams in Washington, D.C. And that was a week straight of match after match. And I'll be honest, I forgot that I was really the only woman in there because I was just in there to do the job. I have been able to recruit a couple of other younger women into the refereeing program, which is exciting a little more on the local level as they've been some college squash matches and some junior tournaments and so forth. And it's wonderful to see some of these terrific young women coming into the system that is largely male-based. But I feel, and this may be fitting, that a woman belongs in all places decisions are made. And I feel like I want to be a part of this part of squash, not just at the club and local level, but I want to do it at the highest level possible. And it's really nerve-wracking at times, but it's also really great. You get the best seat in the house. You can help establish a fair and safe outcome. And you're participating in the game at really the highest level. It may not be the highest physical level. Those are our professional athletes, but it's certainly the highest level intellectually. And that's a real privilege. I do not take it for granted.
I've always found, having been involved in different aspects of the sport, it's always been interesting to me that at a tournament, even at the national championships, in order for the play to continue or to the championship to happen, is you need to be cooperative on court and competitive, but you can't play the sport unless there's those two elements because we share the same space. But then it's self-governing that the winners and or losers, depending on the way that the tournament is structured, will then have to referee the next match. And I know that's a given within our sport, but anytime I mention that to someone outside of our sport, it's fascinating. How many other sports does that occur? And I think that it presents an opportunity for why our sport is such a connected community, but can also present challenges.
There's no question that my desire to develop as a referee has come out of my playing experience. And they will partner for, in my view, the next 50 years. I will continue to play and I will continue to referee, and not just at a club level. It's fine if that's what it would be, but I want to take both of those to the higher level. Now, I'm not likely to play PSA in my sunset years, but certainly at a master's level. And my understanding of the game is developing as a referee and vice versa. I applaud the people that come off the sidelines and just step in and want to referee squash that have never played it. It's very hard to do. And many of some people have done it. John Mazzarella has done it. He admits that he was never a super proficient squash player. He's a passionate squash player, but he was never super high level player, but he simply loves the game and has worked his way to where he sits really at the top of this community. And that's pretty cool, but it's hard. It's really hard.
I think that's one thing that is underestimated, that we do spend a lot of time trying to improve our own squash game, but then spending dedicated time towards improving as a referee, it's a separate skill set that you have to develop. And I think that's sometimes not as much acknowledged of what needs to get done. Let's get into a scenario. You said you were at the US Open or the US Men's Team Championship. Talk us through what it's like being in the seat of controlling a match. What's going through your head?
Oh, it's so intense. And I'm going to say that it depends, which is probably not a very definitive answer. I feel as if those high-level matches, men's and women's, if I'm on the glass court with the headset and a video referee and I'm on squash TV, automatically there's another layer of detail and distraction that one must take into account. So you're on your game 110%. And I've had some of the experiences that I've absolutely had some technical glitches. I've made some errors. I've learned from them, but you're not going to learn what you need to learn when you're not in that position. So the only way to really learn that and figure out how to try and smooth those tough times over is in the hot seat. It's very intense. You are trying to manage technology, an iPad, a video referee, the house mic, the PSA mic. There's lots of that. And it's super exciting because you're a part of it. The decisions themselves don't always feel as intense. They feel like, well, you got that. It's the technology around it that for me has been the bigger stumbling block, but I'm definitely getting better at it. And too bad for this pandemic because my practice was just placed on hold for 6 months. Now things are coming back and hopefully we get more opportunities to get back in it. But it's like anything, you got to stay well oiled and you got to keep doing it for it to feel comfortable and regular. So I look forward to the opportunities to get back and do that. It's the matches where, say, I was on a back court at Squash on Fire and I'm the sole referee, ref and marker for, say, the 23-24 playoff, right? These guys are fantastic squash players, but they're not vying for the trophy. And they still make play look so easy and smooth, and they are working so hard. And it is in those matches where the decisions are somewhat tougher, but the experience is almost easier because you're not recorded. You have an iPad, but you don't have somebody you can discuss this with or spend time discussing it with. So the experiences can be a little different. And I like to get the practice with the decisions, but I also like to get the practice with the tech and the whole environment. And I'm really grateful to some of the folks who have found me after matches and validated some experiences that I've had, some decisions I've made, some explanations I've given. Those are my peers. Those are some players. I feel like I'm very open to feedback and criticism to help me be a better chair referee.
Yeah.
Even if it's turn down your mic, hope you're too loud. We can hear you everywhere. I will say that I come at this refereeing piece with just the benefit of having a strong voice. And it projects. No one is, for better or for worse, nobody is unclear as to what decision I've made, whether it's the right one or the wrong one. I can be heard, and there's not a lot of time wasting in it.
Well, I think you're actually bringing up points for my next question that I was going to ask. So let's dive into this a little bit. I think within junior squash, there is a tremendous amount of focus on refereeing. So let's leave that, because where I think there's not a lot of attention for refereeing is actually within the adult community. So if we're giving some tips, if you had to give however many tips you think is best for an adult squash player when they're at a tournament or just even in a league match, what advice would you give them to go practice or to how to develop as a referee themselves? And you can separate pre-match and then also in the match.
So I think it can be really unsettling to go to a match and referee a match that might be a higher standard than what you are as a player. Let's assume that you feel decent enough about your refereeing at your own playing level. Then you are asked to step up your game, your refereeing game, to somebody who might be 1 or 2 rating points higher or might be a different gender. I say that because I think that there are some women who are understandably more fearful of refereeing higher level male players. And I've just seen it time and time again. And I know that even at the How Cup, there are women who are refereeing who are nervous about refereeing women that are 1 or 2 levels higher than they are. And I guess my advice would be confident at whatever level you are at. Be confident with your decisions where you're at as a referee. If you're refereeing anything, you probably have seen enough squash to know basic right from wrong. I'm not suggesting that, say, a 2.5 level player would be ready for PSA, but if you're a 2.5 or a 3.0 level player, interference, a stroke, there's some real basic things that can happen. And you can make a decent enough decision. If you get nervous and you lose your footing, the whole castle comes down. And the players feel that, and the players lose confidence, and the players are doing enough work out there anyway that let's not have them lose confidence. You want the players to know that you are engaged, you are focused, you are paying attention to everything they are doing, to time delays, foot faults. And so the fact is that if you are having to make lots and lots of decisions, there's something wrong with the players.
Sure.
So that's not your problem. It's your problem as a referee. But I would say to a referee, these players, they don't need decisions on let or no let or stroke. They need some counsel as to how to move the ball to different parts of the court so that this traffic doesn't continue to happen. They don't really want to engage you as a referee. They want this match contested on the court, not in the gallery from the referee. If I were watching an experienced referee struggle, I might help them and say, at a certain point, you could suggest that to one or both of them that they make a different decision for their shot selection, because constantly hitting the cross court puts them and their opponent in each other's way, or something like that. Or if you hit a drop, you have to clear your shot, or don't hit it back to yourself, because oftentimes directing a player can help clean up a match completely. And then a 3.0 level player would be perfectly fine at refereeing a 5.0 level match, if that makes sense. But too often, inexperienced referees get nervous. Just, you wouldn't want me as an architect of a building. I'm not a very good architect. Probably the building would fall. But if I did a lot of
Right.
architecture, maybe I would get better. So I would also say, just do more of it. Do more refereeing. Show up. Be a fake referee next to somebody else. Go watch a squash match and be the referee in your mind and see how you would go throughout that, assuming you have the time and the interest. But a lot can be learned by watching people, and not just in terms of decisions, but in terms of style. What works for somebody? Does it work to take a little moment before you issue your decision? Are you better off making a quick decision and trying to stand behind it? If you watch all the top referees, everybody has their own personal style. And we are all encouraged to be ourselves and develop our own style, assuming we're making the decisions that would align with the way PSA is going to make them. And that's the highest authority here. But you want to develop your own style and personality, and getting the job done, not being too much a part of the match. That's the best. The best referee is somebody who's not really having to get involved with decision making again and again. Somebody simply who is keeping a safe and fair playing environment, and the score is the ideal. You don't want to remember the referee from a match. You want to remember the score and the outcome and the glory of the victory, or the learning in defeat, or whatever it is.
I think you're so right in terms of just like we develop as a squash player. It's the same thing, just in a different application for how we develop as an official. And there's all the fundamentals we need to learn. There's all the technique. But then I love what you said about there's your own style. And I think that's when you start crossing over into being fluid or confident, is when you're like, okay, this is my style and this is what I can do. Like me trying to mimic Mohamed El-Shabagi's forehand might not work for me. It could be aspirational, but I need to find what's my best forehand or what's my best backhand.
That came to me, really, it took almost 9 months, but between my experience in Lima at the Pan Ams, and I'm with a whole bunch of other referees from other countries, many of whom are not English speaking. I was freaking cold down there, but it was my first really big, I'd done some PSA events, but first big one. And I was there for the duration, for the week. And I was very nervous. I was not on the glass court, but then I was also doing some doubles refereeing, and that's different. And thank God people came and bailed me out on some things. And it was great. When I think about the development and the growth of my confidence from July at the Pan Ams to December at the men's world teams, to then doing the men's and women's CSAs 2 months later, smack before COVID, it really, I know how I am as a player. I know what I can do on court. I know what the weapons I will go on with pretty much any given day. And that's taken me 30 years to develop. As a referee, I moved from I was still refereeing the same level of play. Pan American squash competition is just a smaller bit than the men's world teams. A bunch of those teams were there. So I was put in that situation in July and I was nervous and I probably showed. And then I went through October through the US Open and DC at the men's world teams. And that's not to say I was super confident and mighty at the men's world teams, but I was not afraid of any match that I got assigned to. And that was a huge piece of building for me and development. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I signed up to do the men's and women's CSA's teams, because they were local and it's great practice, and I had done the men's teams, and I thought, what I know is that I'm going to do the best job I can do. And I know that these communities need to see a woman. They need to have somebody who is deeply invested in the game and loves to improve and wants continued exposure. So I couldn't really fail at that thing. I had a lot more confidence, and I had a lot of people. The coaches, by the way, were super appreciative that there were referees at the CSA because it takes it out of their hands. Now, they may not agree with your decision, but at least you are consistent through the weekend to weekend. And I had a whole bunch of squash weekends of refereeing in a row through January and February. So they pretty much knew what I was going to deliver. And they seemed to want me back. So that felt pretty good. And I'm getting to know the experiences of these kids. I'm getting to know their personalities a little bit. Squash really exposes personality. and
Completely.
and there's nothing that will expose it faster than a really intense squash match. And I think we are among the luckiest people alive to be a part of this small but global community, where I happen to be in it in a new position as a referee that can be a little tricky sometimes, because I can have people really disagree with my decision. And that hurts because I don't like conflict. On the other hand, I think there is not a player out there who does not know that when I'm on their match, it is a huge privilege for me, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure that they decide the match, not me.
I think that's a great philosophy. And just one of the things for context for any listener, when we're talking about CSAs, it's talking about the College Squash Association and referencing the men's and women's national team championship that occurs. And it's just to highlight, if you think of where we are as a sport, that without people like yourselves picking up the clipboard, so to speak, and getting involved in a different side of the game, by comparison to March Madness, where they have referees and it's just a given, it's not within our sport right now. And we're trying to put more resources behind it, but we need people. And whatever level you're at, and I hope you're such a demonstration of that, of getting behind a different aspect of the sport, really need help. And it can be very rewarding in such a different way.
Well, I will say that Rich Wade was critical in inviting me with opportunities to develop and to succeed and not succeed too fast. There's lots of other people who've been involved in my enjoyment of refereeing: Mike Riley, Tamer Al-Nagari, Wayne Smith, Sheldon Anderson. There are people who have been influential. Dave Howard in Canada. There are people who've been involved in helping me along. And isn't that the way everything is? We move through this world. We hopefully move through this world with the help and support of people that we come across along the way. And I happen to have come across the refereeing thing, having really wanted to be very involved in coaching for US squash at a much higher level. And I realized that I love coaching and I will continue to do, but that's pretty well saturated. They got a lot of great people there. And there was opportunity for me in refereeing. And I pursued dual tracks for a while and really had so many more opportunities to referee. And it's given me similar things: travel, squash exposure, and a real continued growth of and learning of the game. And I would really hope, because I know that the refereeing is not going away, There's even been talk about maybe doing remote refereeing. But I think that until the video technology gets really exceptional, I think there's no substitute for being in person as a referee. I'm not sure we need lots of people behind the glass, but doing a match is really the very best experience to offer the referee the best chances of doing the best job for the players who are doing 100 times more work than the referee at any given time. I hope, and I've seen in Manchester now at the PSA, they've got referees there. It's not like somebody's remotely refereeing. So I'm optimistic that referees will continue to be a part of the active part of the game, the present part of the game.
So, a while back, were you wondering who our sponsor is? Well, the mystery is over. It's Pro Sport LED. Now, for a new mystery. What do they do? The innovators at Pro Sport LED develop custom solutions for each individual sport, based on photometric studies as well as understanding the needs of all people involved in the sport, from amateur players to the professionals, but also from the spectators to the facilities team taking care of the building. They'll develop the most technologically advanced LED lights. What's also great about this advanced LED technology is it takes the standard features but then goes further by addressing 3 more problems that competitors don't. They cure any glare issues or being blinded by the lights while playing your chosen sport. Each individual slim profile fixture can be Wi-Fi enabled, so you can control the lights from the phone in your pocket. And they are perfect for the digital-first media approach by providing 4K quality and consistency for any film or photography needs. Go beyond standard basic lighting. Pro Sport LED has you covered. Your trusted source for sports facility lighting with advanced LED technology. These lights are the perfect solution for anyone building a new facility, but also easy to retrofit into existing buildings, likely saving you money in the long run. Find out more info by going to squashradio.com/LED. We think they're great, and so will you. One quick thing, and I'm blanking on when the development of this was going on, but one of the things was actually talking about almost an AI referee. And it's still way better right now to have great officiating crews, but think of how many matches occur that aren't officiated at all, even at the basic level of just scoring. Like when you're in the heat of competition, you get distracted and you don't always remember the score. So just even it can take on the burden of the marker role would be really helpful for some of these matches. I thought that was a cool development. So you did touch on this, and I'd like to dive in a little bit more of talking about your role as a coach. And I think that's another interesting way to get involved in the sport and also get to know players in a different way. And I know you've had such a variety of experiences there. So talk a little about your involvement as a coach.
So I have done high school coaching and summer Europe team coaching and individual coaching, some juniors, some adults. And I absolutely love, and currently, I'm not currently because we're in this pandemic and my facility is shut down, but recently I've been the coach at Harvard Business School working with their students. And I have to say that I absolutely love coaching. I love being on a court with another player who is trying to build and develop their game and become a better version of themselves. The team coaching was great for me when I was younger and my kids were much younger. And I did high school and college and a couple of different high school teams for a while. And then when I wanted a little bit more flexibility in my schedule with my own kids doing their own activities and my desire to play a little bit myself and travel a little bit, managing a high school team as a coach became much tougher because you can't just get away. So that's when I really turned to coaching individuals. And that has been super fun for me. I'm the architect of my day. I love to give a lesson. It's pretty high energy. And I maybe love to give a lesson because I'm not giving 10 consecutively. That would be fairly exhausting, but I pick my poison and love to work with individuals of all ranges, of all ages and ranges, who are looking to bring their game to the next level or bring a game. I've started a couple of people and that has made me feel great. And a couple of the people that I've started have started other people. And that also feels great. In a way, growing the game in that way is terrific. I love to be around the great coaches of the world. I mean, I love to be around the CSA because there's lots of great squash being played, but the coaches that we have in our College Squash Association right now are some incredible human beings. They know, let me point out, Mark Allen is one of my all-time favorite people. Incredible squash resource, incredible human being. And I could spend lots of time around Mark and some of his people. And so I guess I feel like I'm very lucky to have had incredible coaches, my own high school coaches, my college coaches. I think of the person who first taught me how to play squash, David Bannard. I think about him every time I step on a squash court. I know that sounds crazy because there's a lot of that, but how grateful am I that somebody taught me how to play squash? That completely changed the way I enjoy life in such a good way. And I feel like I need to share that. If I'm only, teaching a forehand or teaching a backhand or helping somebody figure something out, that to me is every bit as valuable as helping a junior team get a gold medal somewhere or helping a PSA player cinch the final in a paid event. Coaching is moving the needle wherever you start it. So wherever you are, at whatever level you're at, if you can move the needle a little bit, you are essentially coaching. And I do squash coaching. I also do health and wellness coaching. And that obviously has a different kind of an application, but they are complementary because a lot of squash players like to hit a squash ball, but they're also they play squash maybe for wellness, or they're trying to work on different aspects of their lifestyle habits. And so I got about a decade ago, I got a certification as a health coach, and that has been a wonderful complement to my squash coaching. It's the way I live my life. If I feel like it's a trumpet I play, and it's definitely helped some other people, whether they're beginners, juniors working through the things that they work through, or adults that are looking for a release from their high stress jobs. And the game is just so appealing to them that it's a lot of fun to be on court with somebody who spends most of their day designing architecture models or defending somebody in a court, and they get to come out on their for their hour break and work on their back wall retrieval or their drop shot or something. It doesn't matter to me that they're playing in a 3-0 league. They love it and I love it. So to me, the variety of coaching experiences that I have had and that I've been exposed to will continue to keep me in the coaching game for a long time. And it's funny, I am probably a better coach now than I was 30 years ago because we hope we develop. And I think I probably am based on the feedback I've gotten. But I hear from some of my players from 25, 30 years ago, and I was present with them. I maybe didn't know as much as I know now in life, and I'm definitely a better listener and I have lots more to offer now. But the profound impact that evidently I had on them in their time makes me realize that coaching is a very powerful part of life. It's a very powerful position. And I am grateful I've had the opportunity to do it. I'm also grateful I will have the opportunity to do it for the next 30 years of my life, because I guess that's a little bit of a segue into the fact that I feel like I'm in a little bit of an age sweet spot right now with squash, because I have terrific exposure to some of the young folks that are 30, upwards of 35 years younger than me. And I've had the incredible privilege of being around some fantastic mentors who are 35 years plus from me in the master scene. And I can look in both directions now and think, wow, like this really is a lifelong sport. I will be in this for sure as long as I am on the planet. And I hope it's another at least 35. And that's why it's really important to me to know some of the next generation, because they have incredible energy and stamina and enthusiasm and commitment to the game. And yet, let's not forget about the people who have been playing this game a long time, when there were no referees and no heating units in buildings and no, you go back, these are hardball folks, and they are passionate and dedicated, and they love the sport as much as the young ones do. It's amazing how the love of the sport, it just has not gone away. It may look a little different because the environment is different now, and how incredible we have all these facilities all over the US and trying to create as much access as possible. And I'm so grateful to the people and the institutions that are doing that. But I'm also, I feel like I'm in the company of the most amazing few decades of the people that are 70 and 80 years old, that these guys who are still playing and playing world masters, and they love the sport and they love everything about it. And I feel that's very special. I can't really put my finger on it, but it's a very special thing to see. Where else do you have generations interfacing like this with such passion? We're very lucky.
I'm going to butcher this, but I had the opportunity and privilege of working with Coach Asiante, who's obviously the men's coach of Trinity, one of the most, or the longest winning program in squash history. But I worked with him in terms of Team USA. And it was very interesting being so close to him and learning his philosophy and his understanding of coaching. And again, I'm going to butcher this, but what I remember was when we boil this down to coaching, he's like, the least of what he does is actually involving in squash. It's he understands people and what makes them tick and how to move them. And so I wonder, given how you've, and especially with both the squash side and the health and wellness side, what are your thoughts on when you're working with a player, junior or adult, doesn't matter. What are some revealing things that you've learned while trying to focus on their game?
I would say get to know all aspects of them. That is something that, or as many different windows into them as possible. This is not just about their swing. This is about how they feel about themselves, what they like to do outside of squash, and being with them. What's going to be the way that I can support them the most? You've captured Paul just right. He taps into people and helping people do stuff that, and it may not be on the squash court, but it's in life. He wants to access your engine, and he will not forget you. And I think that's a really important part also. I try and remember all the details of the people that I'm working with, whether it's somebody might have a physical injury, or they might have something going on in their family, or they might have a stumbling block for themselves, or habits that can get them down. Just being a really good observer of the people that you're around, being aware of the environment helps access so much for a relationship, for a good relationship.
Are there any examples that, as you're saying that come to mind of how you did that and the impact it had?
So I'm gonna flip this a little bit, because I think that the place I learned this the fastest was also the rawest. And that was my college squash coach, Steve Pilch, who continues to be one of my closest friends today, truly almost 40 years later. Steve knew I was a pretty decent junior player. decent enough junior player. I was in a recruiting pod, and Steve was the coach at Harvard at the time. And a couple of the top three of us who were in the recruiting system ended up at Harvard. Or I shouldn't say the top three. Three of us who were in the top pod ended up at Harvard. And I was every bit as talented as the other two, I felt like. And I got to Harvard, and it was really overwhelming for me. All of a sudden, everybody was smarter, faster, leaner, meaner. And it was huge. And Steve, and I sunk hard. I would say that I struggled hard with some performance issues. I had knee issues, and I didn't feel great about my overall performance. I probably dodged a few things. I was pretty obsessive about a few things. I was compulsive about a few things, and I wanted to leave. And Steve hung with me and gave me the latitude, talked to me about some hard discussions, talked to me openly, and supported my decision to not play squash in my second year, having had a pretty mediocre first year. And Steve allowed me to submit a transfer application, or not allowed me, of course I was going to do it, but he supported me and said, you got to do what you got to do. And meanwhile, I was trying to figure out which end was up. And I loved squash, but I didn't love feeling the massive pressure of this new place. Everybody else was killing it, and I felt like I was drowning, and it was really intense. So I pulled out of squash for a little bit and submitted a transfer application. Ultimately didn't follow through with transferring, though I was admitted to the institution that I wanted to go to, or I thought I wanted to go to. And I hung in there, and I gave Harvard another chance and came back to the team. And I was supported by terrific captains, and I reset my playing expectations, because the two people that I had come in with, one was now basically playing number one, and the other had opted to leave squash altogether. It was a weird time in my life, and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out where I was going to land, and never really being satisfied with my squash performance. And I probably struggled with some undiagnosed anxiety at the time. I definitely had some body image issues that I was struggling with, and nothing really felt great. It felt fine, but it didn't feel great. And I decided to run from it all. And I went away fall of my senior year of Harvard, which was pretty much unheard of at the time. I did a study abroad in Australia, and then came back and finished up my time at Harvard. Was super happy for my Harvard degree, but felt like my squash experience, my accomplishments were like a C plus, but getting through Harvard was like, thank God, the goalposts, and I cleared it, and we're done. And I still loved squash, but Steve was with me the whole time, by my side, and he never really let me just go off into the sunset. He gave me some latitude. He was certain that he was going to make sure that I knew he was by my side whenever I needed support. And he's a terrific educator, and has gone on. He was at the ed school at the time, and he went on to be the head of Shipley School for 25 years or something, and has had an enormously impactful career in education. And anybody who played for Steve in the late 80s, early 90s would say that he has the heart of gold, and he would never let you down. And he never did. And I feel like my commitment to being in education and being a good coach is really drawn from the commitment he showed me as just being there, being a good listener, and being steady as they go, and understanding that people have these sort of waves. And Steve is very familiar with many aspects of mental health, and helped me. He gave me some great resources and connections, and he knew that in time I would figure it out. And probably 10 years after college, in the early 2000s, was when I really found my stride for squash, for my true joy of squash. knowing that my college years were not as amazing squash wise as I had hoped them to be. I went in with these great expectations and then came out or through it and then came out maybe a little disappointed. And that's really hard to face when you're surrounded by high performing, high achieving people. And Steve said, just there's time. There is time. And you learn from that. And here you are. And Steve has been with me through lots of things, but through the last 15, 20 years, which has been a really terrific story of squash that I probably never imagined I could write. Squash, not just playing, the coaching and the refereeing and the sort of involvement, the global exposure, the ability to travel, the relationships that I've developed. And I think he would say it's perfectly fine that you were a C plus in college, because now you can look back on that and appreciate that for what it was and go on now and fire on all cylinders. And that's pretty exciting. And by the way, I think the fact that I could acknowledge the personal frustration and disappointment that I felt with somebody who was my teammate, I wanted to be joyful for her, but it was hard. I was super selfish and independent, and damn it, I wanted results for me. And that's not really a team player. And Steve pointed that out to me. And it takes a while to figure that out, especially in fast moving currents. And I was in those currents. So I guess I would say that Steve really gave me opportunities to learn more about myself and to learn about the ways in which I needed to move through this world as a great coach, as a great mentor, as a great friend, as a great listener. I guess I would also say that throughout the last, I don't know, probably 10 years, I have found that squash people are around every corner at the right time. Whether in some darker moments, there's been a squash person who has, for whatever reason, given me awesome things to think about or do or be, learn about, listen, frankly, be a better spouse, be a better parent, be a better friend. And the squash community has really rallied for me. So obviously, I'm going to turn it back around and rally for the squash community. So I feel wherever there may a squash player be, I certainly will offer my loyalty and my energy, maybe a little a humor and a backhand and a game here and there, because I have incredible gratitude for the people in the sport who have really buoyed me in moments that have felt really dark.
That was a lot of good stuff.
I'm sorry.
No, it was really good. I think you touched on just so many important elements of us as players, but also the full almost life cycle of what we experience as a player from a coach and then what we try and embody for others. I would like to... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just going to chime in and also say that in reflecting back upon my comments earlier about the fact that I feel like I'm in this age sweet spot because I have these folks decades north and decades south of me, and how lucky we are that we have this intergenerational community. I would say that I've seen some really intense behavior out of juniors and the younger ones that are still figuring out their own personalities and their development and so forth, and wins and losses. And I will say one of the amazing things about our sport is that I love to be around the 75 and 85-year-old men who are playing, and women, the 75-year-old women and the older men who are playing. They have some of the exact same intensity and expression when it comes to this sport as some of our younger people do. It's wild how it may come out differently, but the feelings are largely the same. We love to hit squash balls. We hate to lose matches in the fifth game. The head gets in the way or the tin gets in the way. And some of the things I've heard from some of the oldest people in this game make me realize that this game has incredible staying power, for better, for worse. And it can elicit such intense feelings You have to understand that this game is going to take you super high, and there are moments that can feel super dark and super low. And if you don't understand that getting into the game, that's a liability. Maybe swimming is that way too, or maybe chemistry and Shakespeare are that way also. I feel like, how lucky am I to be exposed to something that can offer me this incredible range of feeling, right? These highs, the endorphins, the connectivity. I am a person who totally moves by other people. I love seeing people. I like bringing energy and creating energy in places. And the people that have brought their life, their experiences to me in this sport have helped me laugh. They have helped me cry. They have helped me find incredible new level of vitality and life force.
This segues a little bit into putting yourself back into the role as a player. And the scenario that I'd love to hear about has to do with you and the British Masters, which you are distinguished as being the most winningest American player on men's and women's side, or on the women's side.
Richard Millman would probably have the real answer because he would know the stats better. But I have won 4 British Open Masters in a couple of different age categories, and those have been pretty profound experiences for me, profoundly positive.
So for sure, we can say on the women's side that you're the most winning player in the British Masters. And what I would love to know is, I've been on court with you. I've seen you play. You are almost the epitome of a competitor. Like, you are very competitive. And I'm curious, when you're going through those tournaments, which are big global stage championships, what are you thinking to try and win those championships? Or what do you think helped you win those championships the most, if you had to point towards one element?
So I think that I went into my first one nervous because I was going to a part of the world I'd never been to. I was going alone. I didn't know anybody.
Where was this?
Up in Hull, in Kingston upon Hull, in 2015. It was May, and it was right next to the British Open, real British Open, the big event,
The professional, the professional
event. And I went there hoping that I could see where I could finish, just like, where did I stand? I was pretty sure at that point that I probably wasn't going to make a U.S. team as a non-Masters U.S. team, like a regular U.S. national team anymore. At that point, I was well into my 40s, and I'd had 3 incredible opportunities to represent Team USA earlier and on the real national teams. And I was now beginning to turn my focus to master squash, and which was, I was told, different but exciting. And I thought, you know what, I've got to just get on that plane and go. So I went. And when I got there, I knew Richard Millman and Bert Cornier, and they were terrifically generous and welcoming to me. I think I was the only non-English woman there. There might have been a Swiss woman there, but there were not lots of us. And there was a guy there by the name of Michael Goff, who is a dual citizen from the UK as well as from Atlanta. And Michael introduced himself to me on the first day, and he could not have been more warm and welcoming and supportive. And he said, look, I know I sound English, but I'm from Atlanta, and I'm a US player, and I'm really looking forward to supporting your play here this week. And we became like best friends on the day. And to this day, we will track each other everywhere. Michael won and I won. And it was an incredible friendship that was born. And it was awesome to win, but to win that event. But I'm telling you, the impact that introduction and that friendship had on me was so powerful. It just made me, because I tell all my players, and I've told my kids, when you go to a tournament, it doesn't matter how you do. I want you to meet one new person. Just meet one new person. And if you play enough tournaments, you'll have met enough people that then you'll go back and you'll know some more people. And being familiar with people can help take some of the anxiety away. I was nervous when I went to Hull. I didn't know anybody. And so a lot of my anxiety was about the social aspect of that week, not so much about the play. I could only play the squash that I knew how to play. I happened to have a little confidence that I was playing some pretty good squash at the time based on how I'd been competing against some juniors and college players. But I also didn't know, and I didn't know what master squash was about. So I went in there with more anxiety about the social environment than I did about the squash playing environment. And I don't think.
Quick question, sorry to butt in, but is that so going into it, you had already identified that one of the biggest hurdles here is just my anxiety around going into an unfamiliar terrain. Is that accurate?
100%. And that
Yeah.
seems so weird for a person who would like to think she's generally pretty socially capable and comfortable. And
Sure.
I had enormous anxiety around that travel experience. And I didn't have any ground, I really didn't have much ground control there. And Michael Goff absolutely made that experience. It was helpful to have a couple of fans, and Richard Millman and Bert Cornier. We all had matches around different times, and we were trying to watch each other. And Richard, of course, was his fabulously ushering and supportive and loyal soul that he is. And Bert, the same. Nobody really had any idea how anybody was going to do, but we were all there to give it a go. And then it was little by little, I decided to go back the next year. And I went back and I won 2 different divisions back to back. And that was awesome. And then I went back the following year going, I'm going to win the next one. And I'm going to go back and play 2 more. And it turned out they only let you play 1 division. I think they didn't like the fact that somebody might have come over and snuck away a couple of trophies. So I could only play 1, and that was fine. So I went back and I won the one the next year. I thought, this is really great. And there were a couple of other circumstances around this going back. Again, the second and third years were not held in Hull. And I remember thinking, this is going to be a really hard sell for me to go back to Hull. I'm basically in the North Sea. It's cold. I did win that thing. I've gone. I won. I can come home now, and that's fine. And then when the event was moved to London, and I'd never been to London, I thought, wow, this is my chance. So I went to London and stayed with and called on a former college teammate, Jack Colburn, who lived in London and loved squash and wasn't playing much because he'd had bad hip stuff going on, but he loved squash. He and his wife were super hospitable and cordial, and they let me stay at their flat, and it worked out perfectly. And then the next year I stayed with them again, and one thing led to another, and I wanted to go back because it felt like so much fun. And at this point now, I'm developing relationships with people, Galen Lechaminant, Steve Wren. These are people who have gone to these events. Nick Taylor, that's where I met Nick Taylor. There are people that go and they return and you see them. They're not involved in your daily goings on, but I began to develop these friendships that were meaningful to me on a global level. And we obviously shared squash, but you get to know other people. And it's pretty unusual that you start thinking you can make some really good friends when you're 45 years old. But that's what began to happen. And add to it, I wasn't feeling any effects of age at that time. So I just wanted to keep playing. And then there were World Masters to play. And those environments felt much more digestible because I knew a lot more people now. It wasn't about my play. It never really has been about my play. I'm going to play the way I'm going to play. And I love to play. And I'm going to show up for whatever I have, given what my body is going to offer me. But the social piece of it has always been a level of anxiety that I'm now much more comfortable with, but it's taken some time. And I suppose it's no different when you're 15 or 16 or going to a tournament or going to 18, going to a school and you're starting something new. And those are really intense feelings. But I promised you that squash is going to offer you intense feelings
Sure.
on and off the squash court. And I can say I've had them. So one of the things I think you were probably getting at when you asked that question about the British Open is, what were you thinking about? What were you feeling when you went over there? And I will say it's connected to the squash piece, but one of the most profound experiences I had while over there, I'm in the middle of this nowhere, Kingston upon Hull. And throughout the week, I was pretty excited with my results, and I'm messaging a couple of people and When I get on the morning of my final, I get two messages from one from Sarah Fitzgerald and one from David Palmer, former world number ones who had become friends in different ways. And you got this, have fun out there, do what you know how to do. Can't wait to see the result. I believe in you kind of stuff. And that was the thing that knocked me over the edge and thought, there will be nothing that stops me from this because I feel so supported by people who just love the highest level of this game. Those were really important moments for me. And then, of course, I've continued to build incredible friendships with the titans of our sport in different ways. I've had incredible privilege to be on teams with Natalie Granger and be a roommate with Amanda Sobey. And just being around and building these friendships with the titans of our sport, really. I feel very lucky.
That's another aspect of the sport that is certainly what's drawn me in, as well as being very rewarding. Before we transition, I think there's a way of encapsulating what you just said, but I think one of the core strengths there that is maybe me spelling out the obvious, but is the fact of how self-aware you were of what your actual hurdle was going into a type of competition. And I think this might be true at all levels of the sport. We're always trying to get into the zone. Once we're in the zone, we're going to be at peak performance. Now, whatever threshold that is for junior squash or college squash, but we really are trying to get in the zone. And I think knowing things like having anxiety around a new environment and what are the actions that you can take to then remove that anxiety to allow you to get in the zone. And I wonder if you would agree with that sort of analysis.
So the zone for me, I would agree with that. And the zone for me, it's like an 8-headed beast because it's not just making sure that my drives hit to good length. It is making sure that I have laughed enough. Let's not underestimate laughter. Laughter comes naturally when you win, but you need laughter to a certain extent to cushion a little bit of a loss. And I absolutely feel that in this world, we don't laugh enough. And there's nothing, a little laughter session with somebody like Natalie Granger or Willie Hosey. They are good laughers. They love to laugh. And that is that's a component to my zone that is really important. Yes, my squash is important, but I also need to make sure that I feel like my people are on my team. If I have any sort of injury or any niggly anything, I need to know that I have access to the kind of person that's going to help walk me through it. A couple of years ago, I was down in Charlottesville playing an event, and Jeremy Mayer, who is a physio that worked with US Squash for a while, he was down there and I needed his work to help. It was actually on a hamstring or a groin or something, but I was really struggling and I really needed that talk through and that work to help me bring me back into this place that felt balanced. And I went on court and I was fine. But it's funny how, for me, my zone is multifactorial. It's how my physical body feels. It's how my mental body feels. And it's one loss or one win is not going to completely knock me out. I also need to have extracurricular non-squash things that keep me going and keep me inspired. I love the other things I do. I haven't been able to do as much squash during this pandemic, but I've definitely done other things. And I feel as if the balance shifts from time to time, but I'm ready to come back into squash because I know that I have a variety of things that are in my crock pot that are stewing and brewing at all times, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to transition this to your body of work outside of the squash world. And I know you've had many different aspects of another career outside of that, and would love to switch gears to that. And one thing I know you did about 15 years worth of work at Gregory Floyd Associates. And I'd love if you could give a high-level overview of what that was, and we'll go into some more detail.
In the early 90s, right after college, I really wanted to build a career in independent schools because I learned how to play squash at Groton as a student, and those years were so impactful to me that I felt like I wanted to go back and be a young coach and teacher and advisor, etc. I had gone to Groton School as a student, learned squash from this fabulous math teacher of mine, David Bannard, and I wanted to basically go back and be a young David Bannard. And shortly, I met my husband, another Dave, and he was a teacher, and we began to develop our married life in independent schools. And we were married and we spent 6 years at Westminster School in Connecticut. And I worked in the alumni and development office there. We had our kids. And then my mother passed pretty unexpectedly. And at about end of the 90s, we moved back up to Groton, two young kids. And Dave got a teaching job at Groton, and I did a little bit of part-time work at Groton, but I was also working with this consulting firm doing head of school placement work, independent school, head of school placement work. And I loved my colleague so much. His name is Gregory Floyd, and he had a long career in independent schools. And I somehow got onto him, and we worked together for 15 years doing school placements. So I was in independent schools. I was also doing a little bit of coaching at Groton at the time, but I was primarily Gregory's right-hand person, as we were doing thorough evaluations of schools for our next head of school placements. It was a super exciting time for me because I really wanted to be in independent schools. I was also raising these young kids. It was a flexible job, and it required some skills from me that were different, that I was still connected to the independent school world, but I was doing a lot of interviewing and writing and candidate work and candidate stewardship. I got to know a lot of people in a lot of independent schools. Only one person gets a job, but I probably got to know 10 people in each candidate pool really very well. So my network grew, and in the independent school world, squash is pretty well known. So I felt like I had a little bit of a platform pretty much everywhere that we went. And it was a great career, and Gregory retired about 5 years ago, and I absolutely loved working with him. But it was at that time that I really shifted my commitment more into the squash community.
In terms of looking back on that career, what would you say were some of the, either it highlighted something or a skill of yours that you didn't know you had, or a skill that you developed by going through that work? So what would you say was one or two of your super skills that you harnessed while you're on that track?
I would say that my listening skills got a lot better. That's probably the most important thing.
How did you, just to get into, how do you develop that if someone's curious about it? What did you mindfully do to practice that or develop it?
Well, I remember thinking with every search committee, I needed to make a connection with each person in some way. I needed to find some common ground with that person. We might not necessarily have agreed, but I needed to find common ground. So I needed to listen for the things that they said that I could even latch onto and create a little bit of a bridge. And that was not an experience that I had spent a lot of my life having. I went through my life pretty fast and direct. And when I was faced with a new search committee, one or two each year, I had the opportunity for 10 or 15 good new relationships. And I had to listen to some things, listen to some views, and listen to people's stories. That has actually helped me be a better coach, because you want to listen for key things and things that you can help make better. Not necessarily things I had to change, but maybe things that I could make somebody feel better about themselves with. Obviously, in terms of all the search candidates, I was trying to listen very carefully to those candidates and listen for what kind of match they wanted, what kind of a school they wanted. Was this the right thing? The last thing that my partner and I wanted to do was make a placement just to finish the job. We wanted to make placements that were the right environment, the right school match. And those were lasting positions, lasting relationships, lasting careers. And all of the people that we placed have been in their jobs successfully for longer tenures than most independent school heads. So we felt really great about the relationship building that we did. And I will tell you that at that time, many of my peers were going to law school and medical school and engineers and inventing things and building things. They developed a different kind of skill set and graduate degrees and so forth. I did get a graduate degree in education, but a lot of my peers were doing things that felt maybe at times a little more measurable because they were curing cancer or defending the public. They were developing skill sets that seemed really impressive. And it felt different for me to be in a career that was definitely relationship management more than anything. But I think it has been great because I feel like I do have the ability to listen well and help influence people to being better versions of themselves, whether it's by lifestyle or laughter or sport or connection. I like to know what other people like to do. And I like to drill down on that because it's easy to find out exactly what we all do most of the time. But learning about what people do in the other parts of the time helps me learn about them and understand them. A lot of people know that I play squash and do squash, but there's lots of other things that I do that I love. And I have some really nice connections in the world out there that help me feel like I've got a couple of different lily pads, if that makes any sense.
Of course, this may be accurate or not, but curiosity. It sounds like you were very curious about people and you were leaning into it.
Yeah, I am really curious about people. I'm curious about what they like to do. I'm curious about how they do what they do. I would say that I'm not so old, but I'm getting up there and I've had a little bit of experience in life and nothing really surprises me anymore. If somebody tells me that they are like super way into rolling sushi or way into basket weaving or way into tying dry flies, I'm fascinated by what they get excited about. And if they also tell me that they have suffered from any sort of mental illness or physical illness or something, I'm not surprised by that either because I want their story. Because I think we all have stories that can be so fascinating. And when somebody shares their story, I am so grateful because it helps me. And the gratitude that I have for when somebody shares just a little bit of what they have, what they bring to it is I feel warm. I feel happy. I feel like I want to know that about what makes somebody happy or even what makes them sad, honestly, because there's a lot that can make people sad in this world. And this life was meant to be enjoyed, not suffered. And we all make mistakes at times, but I personally am drawn to being around things that have a higher frequency and feel better, just feel better. They're happier. They make my body feel better, or they make the people around me happier or whatever. And I think it's probably pretty normal. I don't like pain. I don't like that. It doesn't mean I can avoid it at times. And being aware of another person's pain is a massive opening, a massive opportunity to learn, to be empathetic, to be a listener, to be with someone in their pain. I promise you that I never imagined that I could do that because I thought that was for somebody else. But I have learned that, and it's really hard. But there are ways in which some actions and some gratitude and some connection and thoughtfulness can alleviate pain. And pain, it can be described lots of different ways by people: physical pain, mental pain, economic pain. There's so many different ways that hurt can happen. And I don't care who you are. I don't want you to hurt. I don't want you to hurt. I want you to feel better. And I know that feeling better is possible. It is possible. Squash people have illustrated that for me time and again. It's out there. And for that, I'm grateful. So I try and get to know people in the squash community because especially the older people, they've lived a lot. They've seen a lot. And there may be something out there that you can learn or you can help with. And that's being an active participant in life, is being a part of better. Be a part of better.
A lot of what you said deeply resonates with me, and I've always tried to improve as a listener, and I definitely lean into curiosity because I am just very curious about people. I'm going to transition into one of the last segments of this interview, and I call it the quickfire section, which is just we go through some questions I ask every guest. These you can answer in one sentence or take longer if you want, and if the questions end up going nowhere, well, that's totally okay too. So are you ready for the quickfire?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
We'll start off with an easy one. Just what's a favorite documentary that you've watched?
I don't really watch lots of documentaries.
What about a film?
I'm not a movie person.
No problem. There's another question I get to, but that's totally fine. I
will say that I'm not yet a great sitter for movies. I don't sit well. If I'm gonna sit for 2 hours, it's gonna be with another person. It's not gonna be watching a lot of violence on the movies. So I've turned away from that, honestly. I don't love movies. Sorry, that doesn't help the entertainment industry. I realize that, but there's other people that can take my place, and they do.
Well, then what about this question? So the question is, what gets you fired up? And this can be either inside squash world or outside squash world, and it can be negative or positive. But I'm just curious, what is something that really gets you going from 0 to 100?
Gratitude and a little bit of effort. When it doesn't matter what it is, it can be in or out of the squash world. When I see a little bit of effort made and a little bit of gratitude, some initiative and gratitude, I'm all in. It almost doesn't matter what it is.
And was that something, do you think, that came naturally to you, or is it you had to work on and develop?
It's really a handover from my mother, who was one of the most grateful people and expected an attitude of gratitude, and how unbelievably lucky we are.
Is there a way that you would suggest someone how to put that into practice?
Yeah, I guess be a part of better. See something and be a part of better, make it better. And when you make something better, you can feel so grateful that you were a part of it and that you were a part of something bigger. You're probably not, maybe you do it all alone. I don't know. I rarely think great things happen from one person. Great things usually happen with a bunch of people. So be a part of better.
I feel like that's a slogan you're going to have to trademark. So next question is, what is something, and it can be either literally a physical thing or an activity, that gives you disproportionate happiness? Now, the one caveat I would say is, I think friends and family are an obvious one that will bring us that happiness. So leave that aside. And what is either an activity or something like that brings you disproportionate happiness?
Okay, so my gut reaction on this is not really going to be a surprise to you, but it is singing. I absolutely love to sing, and I sing by myself. I sing with a group. I sing alone. I sing in public. I love to sing. I've always loved to sing, and it's what I love. I hope I can do it forever.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because this was on one of the points I wanted to touch with this, is you've also, for the benefits of the listeners, you've sang the national anthem at major sports. And I'm not just talking about the pinnacle of squash, but with in hockey and basketball and baseball. Yeah.
The Red Sox was possibly the most special.
Why is that?
It was the most beautiful day. It was July 3rd. Amanda Sobey and I are on first base at Fenway Park, and the Red Sox are killing it. And we had 40,000 people in Fenway Park, and it was just a magical experience. It was 90 seconds of unbridled joy.
That's pretty hard to top. Well, the next question is, are you familiar with TED Talks?
Yes.
Okay. So the scenario here is you're going to have to give a TED Talk. However, it can't be something that you're known for publicly or is well known for publicly. So The challenge here is, what would be something that you'd want to go explore and then share?
I do love TED Talks, and I've really gotten to love them during this pandemic because they're bite-sized enough, and I listen to them on the elliptical or the bike and whatever, and I'm fascinated by them. But I will say that I have a dream of, I don't know if you know The Moth, the radio hour, but I have on more than one occasion almost thrown my name into the hat as I've entered a Moth venue because I've wanted to challenge myself to get up and just do that. I would want to be given the topic and then have to just deliver for 5 minutes. That's not really a TED Talk, but that's like a public speaking experience that would challenge you in a way that would really feel fun and potentially exciting. And I've seen some really great ones. But you've asked me about a TED Talk.
Well, no, I think that alone, it could be like, what was it like giving 10 moth stories and what did I learn from it? So that could well fill a TED Talk.
I would give a TED Talk or a Moth about experiencing mental and physical pain and the education that those experiences have given me, what it means to face mental pain and physical pain, and how you can get through both with a community of dedicated and loving and patient and experienced people.
I think that would be a very powerful talk. And it's one of the things in this day and age that I'm glad to see that we're turning the corner on being more open and public about this. And I do think that there's two parts of both us as individuals, if we feel as though we're experiencing it, to ask for help or to signal it. And then vice versa. If we've all been, and I'm sure you can see the signs, and it's asking that question that goes that extra layer. But I think it's such an important topic these days.
Yeah. And who knew how my life was going to unfold. And I feel like there's lots more that I get to learn, and hopefully I have lots more time to learn it, because if I'm doing things right, I've probably got another, 35 or 40 years left to kick around. But I will say that I'm not a lifelong learner of the German language or the Renaissance period or Shakespeare or immigration laws or growing practices for non-GMO foods. I'm not necessarily a lifelong learner in those ways, but I will say that I am a lifelong learner, and I hope to continue to meet more people and learn their stories and their joys and help maybe alleviate some struggles along the way.
My next question, and this may help feed the last question we were just talking about, but are there any books that you've loved or you've recommended to others?
There's two books that I have read recently, and I say this, the people that know me and that are listening might say, they might be laughing because they know generally I'm not a reader, but there are two books that have moved me so much. One is by a friend of mine who married a college friend of mine. His name is Bruce Feiler, and he's written a book called Council of Dads, which is an amazing story of his struggles and his triumph over a really terrifying cancer and parenting and friendships and all sorts of stuff. He's alive to tell the story, and it's an amazing story. And I recommend that everybody get their hands on at least one of his many books. But Council of Dads is one that moved me profoundly. And he's got another one out now. He's a pretty impressive guy. The other book that I totally love and have recommended to a couple people, but it's only come to me at my bedside table because my kids urged me to read it, is Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. So 10 years ago was Dave's first sabbatical, and we took our sabbatical and went to South Africa with our kids. And it was at that time that I developed just an unashamed love for that country. I think its people ooze gratitude. The country, the geography is stunning. The Cape of Good Hope is obviously my spirit place. And there's lots of great things about South Africa, not the least of which is the development of Trevor Noah himself, who I think is He is not afraid to tell it like it is. He is not afraid to laugh. He is not afraid to just be a unique person. And I loved his story, and I love South Africa. And I continue to feel like his story is one of incredible opportunity and success. And I love to hear that. He is definitely on the better team.
His ability to be so sincere and to recap stories and share perspective, I think, is very unique and special, especially during these times. And I've appreciated his thoughts on many different aspects, as well as, like you said, the humor he can bring to it, the levity.
Oh my God. We don't consider laughter enough on a daily basis. It should be like brushing teeth. We should do it every day, a lot of it every day. Flossing, laughing. It's the best. And I will say that there were, the beginning of the pandemic, there were lots of funny memes going around. And I swear there were some very funny ones. And it's a quick forward and not at anybody else's expense, just good humor. And I love a good laugh. Bring it on.
Well, this has been such a pleasure, and thank you for your willingness to jump on the episode of Squash Radio, and just want to thank you for your time and your thoughts and your perspective. And we certainly covered a lot of ground, and there's so much more ground we could cover, but thank you for everything you've done in the sport and continue to do, and being involved in all aspects of the game. It really is inspiring, and it's also, I think you've been a recipient of so much within squash, but then I think you're giving it out 10x and tenfold, so thank you.
Well, you're nice to say that. I'm very honored that you asked me to have a chat with you. And I will say that the relationships that we develop along the way are super impactful. And you and I got to know each other for the very first time in Egypt 12 years ago. And who knew that's where this was going? That was a really intense time in my life. And I have absolutely loved to see you develop through this and bring people on and spread the sport and share the sport. And maybe I'll have a different story it's going to be the same story, just a more developed story in another 12 years. And I'll be standing by. But I look forward to what's ahead. And thank you so much for including me. And I hope that you have a good laugh today and know that I'm here all the time, other end of the phone.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. And until next time.
You got it. All right. Peace out.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us on Squash Radio. We hope you enjoyed this latest episode. But before you leave, we just have one quick last message. As you know, Squash Radio wants to help tell some of the best stories from Squash World. But in order to do that, we want and welcome your help. Do you know a person or a story that involves squash that is interesting, funny, moved you care about, reflects your passion for the sport? Well, share it with us and let's try and get it out there on the air. You can email me at squashradio@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. Again, thanks for your time and, well, until next time, be well and have fun.